there's no microphone here. Hi, how are you? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I got to do a balancing act. I got to be loud enough for you to hear me, but not too loud to upset the people doing adoration. That's why I'm hiding behind this pole, so I didn't know how maybe they won't see who's doing it. Well, welcome tonight. Tonight's our 6th night of teaching the Bible cover to cover. Again, I'm Michael Kotch, and let's start off with prayer. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. God, thank you for having us all get together tonight. It's kind of a rough night with a lot of rain and cold weather, and we have to go to a new location, but I love it in here. I wish I could do it in the church every week. This is fantastic. Thanks for gathering us tonight. Please may we learn your word. Please guide with everything that I say so your word comes out accurate. And please let the people who hear it enjoy what they hear. And if it is your word that is being taught, may they take it in their heart and use it in their lives. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Okay, make sure my hold things up straight here. Good, all right. Well, I'm going to start off with how I start off every week. This is just going to be a timeline to catch us up to where we're at. I'm going to start a little bit later. We're going to start right with Noah, okay? Noah, God wiped out the earth because evil. Noah gets out. His family starts repopulating. We have the Tower of Babel. God spreads people out. They kind of populate the world for the most part, or at least parts of it. And the first person, big religious figure that we hear is Abraham. And then Abraham has 2 sons, Ishmael and Isaac. And God's promise goes through his son Isaac. And then Isaac has twins, Esau and Jacob. And God's promise to make Abraham's descendants a great nation goes through Jacob. Jacob has 12 sons. And 10 of the older sons sell Joseph, the younger son, into slavery in Egypt out of envy. And in Egypt, God uses him, his hands on him. And he raises them up, and eventually he becomes second in command over Egypt. And a plan that God gave Joseph is used to save not just Egypt from the famine, but all the surrounding areas, including his brothers and his father back, where they're at. Eventually, Jacob's brothers and his father move with him into Egypt. Now the original 12 sons of Jacob are in Egypt, and they start the 12 tribes of Israel there. Over time, they reproduce and reproduce and reproduce. And over many generations, a new Pharaoh comes into Egypt and says, who are all these people here? The Israelites are not Egyptians. And he's afraid if they go to war, that they might take the side of the enemy. So they decide to turn them into slaves to subdue them. Well, there are slaves, it said in the Bible, for 430 years. They cried out to God. God sent a rescuer in Moses. He freed the Israelites. Now the Israelites are out of Egypt. God promised them to give them a land of their own. I'll call the land of Canaan, which would become Israel. God tests them and says, I want you to send in 12 spies, 1 spy from each of the tribes of Israel to go in and just look at the land. And they come back and say, yeah, the people there are big. We don't think that we could push them out. We don't want to do what God says. We don't want to go in. So God said, okay, you won't. Your kids will, but you guys won't. You're going to stay out until all the adults that rebelled against me, didn't want to follow me, die off. And they did. And then their kids went in. Moses died, and Joshua took over. And under Joshua, they started doing the campaigns to move the people out of the land that God was going to give to the Israelites, and they did. And eventually it transitioned them. The people started falling away from God. One of the things God warned the people was, listen, when you push these people out, these people are evil. Okay, they're not nice people, that's why I'm pushing them out. They worship false gods, they worship demons, they worship the Baals, they do child sacrifice in some of their worship. Do not let these people stay with you. Move them all out. Because if you let them stay with you, their practices are going to start to rub off, and you're going to start doing these pagan practices too. Well, they don't listen to God. Some of them don't. And they let people stay, and before you know it, the Israelites are worshiping God and the Baals. And one day they're going to the temple, and the next day they're doing a child sacrifice. So God said, okay, enough of this. And he said, you like these pagan nations? You want to follow them? I'll let you see what it's like to follow them. I'm backing off my protection. They're going to be your conquerors. And you back off his protection, and the pagan nation will come in and take over the Israelites. And the Israelites see how bad they were, and they cry out to God and say, I'm sorry. He'd raise up a judge. And the judge was somebody he would use to free the Israelites from their oppressors. And we went over a couple of them, but the main ones are Deborah and Barak. We heard of Gideon and Samson. And they would free them, and they were good for a while. But then they would have kids. And then the next generation would, same thing, kind of rebel and start following other gods. Pattern happened over and over again. God would back off his protection. They would get conquered by the nations of the gods they're worshiping. They would say, this is horrible, cry out to God. He'd raise up a judge. The judge would free them. They're okay for a while, then they have kids, and the next kids would do the same thing. So this happened over and over again. Now eventually, there was a prophet named Samuel. Now prophets are people who, God will pick a specific person, sometimes multiple people, and he is basically the messenger between God and the Israelites. So God would tell them, the prophet, something, and he would tell the Israelites. And the prophet Samuel. Now Samuel wasn't just a prophet, he also made him a judge. And then God made Samuel's two sons judges. But they were corrupt judges. They took bribes, they were corrupt, they did all kinds of bad stuff. So people said, you know what, Samuel, tell God, we're sick of these judges, we don't want judges anymore. We want our people to have a king, like all the countries around us. So Samuel went to God and said, hey, the people want a king, what do you think? And God said, tell them no, I'm their king. I don't want them to have another king but me. So he went back and told them, and the people said, no, we want a king. Tell God we want a king. All right, so Samuel goes back, says they really want a king. And God said, well, if that's what they want, I'll let them have it. Now I'm going to warn them. If they really want a king, I'll give them one if they're going to have problems with this king. All right? Are they sure they want it? Yeah, we do. Okay, I'll give you a king. So God told Samuel to anoint a man named Saul as the first king of Israel. Now God anointed Saul because it's what the people would want. People judge by what they see. God judges by the heart. Saul was 7 feet tall. Saul was handsome. Saul was strong. Saul was the guy who would, beau of the high school class, really a homecoming king, that kind of guy, right? So God said, okay, we anointed this guy as your king. Right off the bat, now remember, Saul was a nothing, all right? The only reason why he was king was God picked him to be king. Before this, he's just another guy. He's just some guy, some tall, good-looking guy. He wasn't anything. They said actually in his coronation, he hid behind a pole, kind of like I'm hiding from there if I get too loud, because he's nervous and he's scared, and they had to bring him out. But he was their king. Right off the bat, he started disobeying God. There was a point where God needed the prophet Samuel to do some kind of prophet blessing, and Saul took matters into his own hands, and he did it. So God said, listen, I picked you as king. These are my people. They're not your people, Saul. You're king over them, but these are my people. You got to follow what I say, and you're not. So I'm going to remove you as being king. Well, he did something again, and God reminded him again. I'm going to remove you as king, and I'm going to pick another guy who's going to be king, who's a man after my own heart. So Prophet Samuel was sad about this. Yeah, we gave the people a king, and he's doing all these problems. And God said to Samuel, don't be sad. We're going to get a better king. You're going to go to this guy's house named Jesse. And Jesse has several sons. And when you get there, I'm going to show you which one of his sons eventually will be the future king of Israel. And this is going to be a good one. This is going to be a man after my own heart. Because I judge by the heart. I don't judge by outward appearance. So he went to Jesse and said, bring out all your sons. And eventually, the runt of the litter was David. And God said, that's the one. It's going to be king. So he anointed him king. Okay, and this is what we're going to pick up for today. So just kind of quickly to get us where we're at. Anybody hear David and Goliath? Yeah, that's a good one. That's what we're starting off with tonight. We're starting off with a bang. Okay? So during the time that David was a young man, Israel was at war again with the Philistines. They're always fighting these Philistines, still today. On one occasion, the Philistines set up camp on a mountain that was on one side of a valley in preparation of battle of Israel. So the Philistines set up their camp on one side of this valley in a mountain, and the Israelites were set up their camp on this other side of the valley. And they were preparing to go to battle with each other. Now, the Philistines sent out their champion. His name is Goliath. Now, this guy was 9 feet 9 inches tall. So, if any of you follow basketball at all, regulation NBA height, he's 3 inches below the rim of his head. Okay? He's huge. He wore bronze armor that probably when he went out in the sun, he looked like he was glowing. He had a sword that was huge that really probably nobody else could use. It was so big, and they said he had a javelin that was like a beam. That's how big he was. And he came out, and one of the customs they would do in battle sometimes back then was to spare everybody from getting killed in a battle. Sometimes they would say, look, instead of all this fighting, you send out your best guy, we'll send out our best guy, and they'll fight, and whoever wins, whoever loses, loses, and it might spare a lot of bloodshed. It would just be these two guys. Sometimes they do that. Well, Goliath came out and said, listen, send out your best guy. I want to fight him. If you win, we're going to be your servants. But if we win, you're going to be our servants. Well, the Israelites wouldn't do it because they had nobody near Goliath's size or fierceness. I mean, King Saul was like probably the biggest guy they had. They picked him because he's 7 feet tall, which is huge. This guy was 9'9", okay? And he was a fighter. He's been fighting since his youth. Now we're in book of 1 Samuel, chapter 17. So Goliath came out and he cursed at the Israelites and cursed at the Israelite God, which is our God. He did this for 40 days. Now they're on both sides of this valley, and every day he'd come out and curse the Israelites and curse their God and send somebody out to fight, and you're a bunch of cowards, and cursing at everything. But they wouldn't go, they wouldn't fight him. And for some reason, the two armies didn't go into battle with each other. I don't know why, but they were just waiting for something. Now one day, David's father, Jesse, was back home with David, and David's brothers were in the Israelite war camp. I guess they were soldiers. So Jesse said to David, who's the youngest one, listen, go bring some food to your brothers. They're in the King Saul's army, they're in the camp getting ready to battle Philistines. Go see how they're doing and see if they need anything. So David goes out to see them. It's not, I don't have in the summary, but it's like the brothers were disdained. They came out and they're like, what are you doing here? He's like, really? Like, come on. Like, I just came to see what you needed, So they're talking down to him. Now, when he got near the camp, David heard this Goliath cursing God and cursing the Israelites, And it was clear in the Bible. David heard it. So David started asking the other soldiers, what shall be done to the man that kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this godless Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Now King Saul heard this. Hey, there's some teenage kid that's asking, what are you going to give to the guy that kills Goliath? And I guess a bunch of people start coming up to King Saul saying, this kid, so bring this kid to me. So they bring him to King Saul. And, he starts talking to David, and David said to King Saul, and David's a teenager. He said to King Saul, don't worry, I'll fight the Philistine. King Saul said, that's not a good idea. You're a teenager. This guy's been fighting since he's been a teenager, and he's a grown man now, and he's a giant. And David said, listen, I'm a shepherd. And back home tending my sheep, there's been several occasions where a lion would come and grab a sheep or a bear, and I would chase him down, and I would kill it, and I would get the sheep back. And I'll do the same thing to this no-good Philistine that's cursing the armies of God. And don't forget, we read earlier, the Spirit of God is with David by this point. So it must have been persuasive. So King Saul said, go and let the Lord be with you. Go fight him. So David was getting ready to go out and fight him. He tried on the armor. It didn't fit him. He's a teenager. I can't move in this. So he said, I don't need any armor. And he had a slingshot. He went down to a stream, and he got 5 smooth stones out of the stream. And he went out to fight Goliath. Now Goliath saw this teenager coming out to fight him, and he became incensed. You're sending a kid to fight me? Are you serious? And he said, I'll rip his head off and feed his body to the birds. And he started again cursing the Israelites and cursing God. And David said to him, you come to me with the sword and with the spear and with the javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, who you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down. All the earth will know that there is a God in Israel, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand. So, all right, let's go. So Goliath started walking towards him. David just ran at him. He just darted at Goliath. And he grabbed the slingshot and he grabbed the stone. I don't think it was one of these. It's kind of more, I don't know what it was, But the Spirit of God was with him. And he whipped this stone and it hit Goliath so hard in the head it sunk into his forehead. And he fell down on his face. Now David didn't have any other weapons. All he had was a slingshot. So he took Goliath's big sword off of Goliath, who's on the ground, and he could barely lift it, and he killed him with it, and he cut off his head, and he held it up. And all the Philistines freaked out and scattered, and there was no battle, And David defeated Goliath. Now, after David defeated Goliath, King Saul now moved David into his palace to live with him. I guess palaces were big and they had different people staying there, and David was a war hero now. Just come on, you're staying with me. And there, God made it so that David and King Saul's son became best friends. His name was Jonathan. It actually said that King Saul, or David's soul and Jonathan's soul became blended into one. And they're like best friends, and God ordained it. God made it that way for some reason. Now, just like with Joseph, when Joseph was sold into slavery into Egypt, it said God was with him with everything he did. And in the past, like Joseph, when he was in Potiphar's estate, God was with everything he did, and everything he was successful, so he rose up. When he got sent to prison for falsely being accused of attacking Potiphar's wife, God was with him in everything in the prison, and eventually ran the whole prison. And then God was with him, and he ran Egypt. It says here, God was with David. And it said in the Bible, because God was with David, he was successful at every task that King Saul asked him to do. So whatever King Saul had David do, it worked out great. King Saul eventually made him one of the commanders of his army. And because God was with David, the Israelites won every battle that David was a commander in. So he was undefeated. Every battle he went into, they won soundly. Now, this is where the problems start. Well, there's many problems with Saul, but this is where the problems with Saul started with David. One day after David won a battle, the women of Israel were singing in the streets, Saul has struck down his thousands and David his 10,000s, which meant that Saul's a good warrior, but David's a great warrior. That didn't sit well with King Saul. He became envious of David that day, from that day on, and he decided this guy is going to be a thorn in my side. I'm probably going to have to do something to this guy. Now, the next day, King Saul was tormented by a spirit sent by God. Now remember, by this point, God had rejected King Saul as being king because he kept rebelling against what God said. He was still king. He didn't kick him out yet, but God rejected him, and he wasn't with him anymore. And so he allowed this spirit to come in and irritate King Saul one day when he was in his castle. And while he irritated him on 2 occasions, again, David's living with him at this point, he picked up a spear and threw it at David with intentions to kill him. And both times David ducked out of the way and got out of there. So David's in his castle, and Saul will go into these fits of rage out of nowhere and try to kill David, and then he'd calm down. But it got worse. And then King Saul started planning to kill David. He started making plans. When he comes to dinner, I'll have somebody kill him there. Now his son, Jonathan, and David were best friends. This is probably one of the reasons why God made them best friends. Jonathan would hear this. Dad saying, David comes to dinner tonight and have somebody kill him. So he would warn him, And eventually King Saul found out, you're warning David that I'm going to kill him. Well, David didn't do anything to you. So now, he was, by this point, Saul just was after him to kill him. David was out of the castle on the run from King Saul. David gathered a bunch of men. There was this group of men that kind of went with him. I think it was around 400. And he was on the run from King Saul, who wanted to kill him. And the only reason why he wanted to kill him was he was envious of him. He didn't even know that he was going to be the next king yet. He just, I don't like this guy. So at one point, David's on the run from King Saul, who clearly intended to kill David. And David and his men entered this town called, I don't know how you say it, it's N-O-B, I guess, Nob. He entered this town called, let's say, Nob. And it was a town that mainly had priests that lived there. So David went into town and went and met with this head priest named Ahimelech. And he said to the priest, listen, I got this group of men with me. And everybody knows David because he's a war hero. He wins every battle he's in. He's a good guy up to this point. Everybody likes him. So everybody knows him. And the king knew him, or the priest. And he went up to this head priest and said, listen, hey, do you have any food for my men? I have this group of men. I need some food. Oh, yeah, we got some food for you. Here you go. And he said, do you have any weapons? I need a weapon. He said, well, the only weapon I have is Goliath's sword that, you got, but we're a priest. We don't really have weapons. You have that. Okay. And no problem. David's a good guy. There's nothing suspicious. Well, King Saul eventually heard that these priests helped David. And King Saul was trying to kill David. Now, this priest didn't know that. So King Saul summoned this priest Ahimelech, this head priest from the town of Nob, and said, I need to see you. Well, he brought all the other priests with him. I guess he thought, I'm going to see the king. And he brought 85 priests with him to go see the king. So the king said to him, why are you helping? Why? I heard that you helped David, who's an enemy of mine. Why did you do that? And Amalek said, I didn't know it was an enemy of yours. I mean, he was like the commander of your army. He won all these battles for you. You know, everybody, I thought he worked for you. I did. And King Saul in a rage killed Amalek. And then he killed the 85 priests. And then he went to the town of Nob, where the priests are from, and he killed everything alive in the town. I don't mean just the people. He killed everything alive. Any animal that was in the town, he just exterminated the whole town. Okay? Out of hatred, anger, power hungry. He was going to hold on to his power, and he was going insane now from it. I'm going to wipe out anybody I see as a threat of mine. And anybody that I guess saw the least of a threat, you know, he just would turn on them like this. So David's on the run from King Saul. And David has these 400 men, and King Saul has a bigger army, and he's chasing David all over the place. And sometimes he catch up with them, and they get away. But there was this one time that King Saul, or David and some of his men were in this cave, and it was dark in there. Okay? I mean, caves are dark. I don't know if it's at night, but it was really dark. But their eyes adjusted. They were in there for a while. King Saul and his men are looking for David to kill him. David's in the cave with these men. And King Saul walks in the cave to relieve himself to go to the bathroom. He can't see David's in there with his men, but they can see King Saul. And David's men said, now's your chance, you can kill him. You know, he's trying to kill you, you're at war with him, you could kill him. And David said, no. And this is why God said, David's a man after my own heart. He's a king anointed by God. God anointed him as king. It is not my place to put my hand on him at all. If God wants to take him out, God will remove him from being king, but I can never put my hand on God's anointed. This is how much David followed God back then. But what David did was he snuck up on him. The king was still kind of blinded, he couldn't see. And he snuck up and he pulled out a sword, and whatever the king was wearing, he cut pieces of the cloth off of the king's thing when he couldn't see him. King gets out, king goes away. He's a little distance away. David comes out with his men, and they yell to him, King Saul, it's David. Ugh. Look down on your clothes. There's a piece missing. I cut this out of your clothes. I could have killed you, but I didn't, because I don't have anything against you. I don't know why you're after me. I mean you no harm. And he said, oh, David, you know, my son. And I was calling my son. I'm so sorry. You're right. You could have killed me. You didn't. You had nothing against me. I don't know what I was thinking. I won't follow you anymore. We did this twice. And quickly after, there's another incident like that where David snuck up in his camp, and he could have killed him and let him go. And he said, I won't come after you anymore, but he would change his mind quickly. And he'd come after David. Now, around this time, Prophet Samuel died. And the Israelites again were in battle with the Philistines. So King Saul was trying to ask God, what should I do in the battle with the Philistines? Well, God was not talking to King Saul, because King Saul was like as evil as they get. So King Saul goes, okay, I want advice on what to do in the battle. God's not talking to me. Prophet Samuel just died. I know what I'll do. I'm going to go to a medium and see if she can conjure up dead Prophet Samuel for me. And I'll ask him what to do. Now, the Bible's clear. You're not supposed to go to mediums. You know, but he does. So he goes to a medium, and he asks her, you know, can you conjure up Prophet Samuel? She's like, what, are you crazy? And then he took his thing off, and she said, oh my God, it's King Saul. He said, I'm ordering you to conjure up Prophet Samuel. Now, I don't know if she's a fraud or she just didn't think it would work, but she didn't expect it to work. So she conjured up Prophet Samuel, and he appeared, and she screamed, ah! Because she didn't expect him to actually show up from the dead, and he did. And Samuel said, what are you doing? Why did you bring me back from the dead? What do you want? And King Saul goes, God's not talking to me. Can you tell me what to do in the battle tomorrow? I'll tell you what's going to happen. You no good, you know, you're causing all these problems. You're going to die tomorrow. You're going to go into battle and you're going to die. That's what's going to happen from all the stuff you're doing. And that's what happened. They got into battle with the Philistines, and King Saul died. And unfortunately, his son Jonathan died, who was David's best friend. He was a good guy. Now, David's brought the news that King Saul died, and Jonathan. And he was sad about it. He was very sad that his best friend Jonathan died. But again, God picked a guy after his own heart. He was even sad King Saul died, because he said, I don't like him, but that was God's anointed. God picked him to be king. And I'm sad that he died. I know he's trying to kill me, but that's not a good thing, you know? Now there was some of the Israel anointed King David to be the next king, but other parts of Israel anointed one of King Saul's son to be king, which is normal. You know, usually if you're a king and you die, your son who's a prince is the next king. And his name was King Ishbosheth. So there's two kings, David over part of it and this other king Ishbosheth over another part of it. Well, some of David's followers, David did not tell them to do this, did not want them to do this, but two of David's followers, they thought they're helping David out. They assassinated this King Ishbosheth because they thought he was going to be a threat to David. When David found out, he said, "What did you do? You know, God didn't say to do that. You know, I didn't tell you to do that." And that was King Saul's son. So he put those guys to death. Again, it shows the kind of character he had. So David was 30 years old when he became king of Israel, and he ruled as king for 40 years. So I guess he ruled from age 30 to 70. That's now we're in the book of 2 Samuel. Now, when David became king of Israel at the time, the Ark of the Covenant, the fancy box of the Ten Commandments, and it was in a tent. That's all it was in a tent. And David felt bad about that. He said to Nathan the prophet, now Samuel died, so God made a new prophet. This new prophet was named Nathan. And he said to Nathan the prophet, basically, look, I'm living in this nice house or palace made out of cedar, and God's Ark of the Covenant's in a tent. That's not right. I want to build him like a nice palace for the Ten Commandments, you know, for the Ark. So he said, talk to God and see what he says. So Nathan the prophet went to God and said, hey, David wants to build you a palace, you know, or a temple for the Ark because, you know, it's in a tent. And God said, tell David it's okay right now it's in a tent because as the Israelites were moving around, they didn't really settle down yet. I can be moved wherever they go. It's easy to move me. So let him know. Also, he said, I don't want David building my temple because although he's a good guy, he's got too much blood on his hands. He's been a warrior most of his life. He's killed too many people. Not the guy I want to build my temple. But let him know one of his sons will. One of his sons will be king of Israel after him, and he'll build my temple. So they told him that. He said, okay. But what God did say to King David was that he would make King David a great name for all eternity. He would protect him and Israel from their enemies so they would not bother them. King David's descendants would last forever, and the kingdom of Israel under David's name would also last forever. This book of 2 Samuel. This is true. Israelites are still here. All those other ites, the Ishboites and the Hivites and Moabites, they're all gone. Israelites are still here. You know, they're going to make David a great name forever. What's the flag of Israel right now? What's on it?
The
Star of who?
David.
Star of David. Okay. However, God's covenant that I'm going to make you, you know, your name's going to be great forever. You always have descendants on the throne. Like all of God's covenants are conditional. I will do this if you do this. But if you don't do this is what's going to happen, you know. So God said that he would be with them and prosper them and protect them as long as they continue to follow God's ways. So God said, you follow my ways and all these things will happen. If they stop following God's ways, the covenant was broken that God made with David and his descendants who would be kings. Now from this point on, David's armies defeated anyone that tried to attack Israel. David was a kind, honest, and fair king. God said that David was a man after God's own heart. Everything was going well for David and Israel because David was a good man that followed whatever God said. That was until David committed a great sin. And at that point, things fell apart for King David because he did something very sinful. If you read the Bible, if you read about David and you see what he says and what he does, you just come across as a good guy, a fair guy, puts God first. He's always like, you know, do the right thing. And the next thing he does is just mind-boggling. It's like such a turn, and such a drastic turn but it happened. Yeah, excuse me, I just got to grab. We're not supposed to drink in church, but sorry, I'll go to confession. While I was talking, my throat gets dry. I was going to bring this in. I saw that sign. This is a holy sacrament. You can't. Oh no. Okay. All right. So one day, King David's king now. One day, King David stayed back at his palace while his armies were out in battle. He was walking across the rooftop of his palace when he looked down and noticed a very beautiful woman named Bathsheba. It's interesting. So he's on the top of his palace and notices this woman, beautiful woman named Bathsheba. What was Bathsheba doing when he noticed her? She's taking a bath. She was. It didn't say where. I don't know if it's a public thing or he's on the roof and looking in windows, but seriously sees this beautiful woman named Bathsheba. So he says to his assistants, "Who is that?" They said, "Oh, that's Bathsheba. You know, Uriah's wife?" Now it's important because Uriah, David was the king, and he had his army, but he had these elite forces. They talk about the group of 3 under him. There's David, and there's a group of 3, and then like a group of 6, and a group of 9, then everybody else. Uriah was one of these like group of a couple, where like he was like his elite fighter, personal appointed, like he knew him well. And he said, "Bring her to me. Bring Bathsheba to me." And they're like, "Are you Uriah's wife?" "Yeah, bring her to me." Okay. So he brought her and he slept with her. And shortly after, Bathsheba sent David a message, "I'm pregnant with your baby." Okay. Now King David tried to cover this up. So what he did was, he said, "Oh, what am I going to do?" So he called Uriah home from battle. He said, listen, come on home. What do you want? You're such a good soldier. You know, you're just a great guy. Take a couple days off. You know what? Take a break. Go home. Spend some time with your wife. Relax. You know, you deserve it. You're a great guy and great soldier. And he said, "Well, I can't. I won't. My guys are out there fighting in battle, and Uriah's a good guy. How could I be in comfort, and how could I be with my wife when my fellow men are out there fighting and dying?" And he slept at the door of the king's palace. He wouldn't go see his wife. So he sent him back out, and he called him again, tried the same thing. Hey, go with your wife." "I can't, I won't." So when King David realized that Uriah's not going to go with his wife, so it won't look like his baby, this is what he did. He wrote a note to the generals. "Generals, it's King David. When you get into a fierce battle, make sure that you put Uriah's group up in the front of the battle. And instruct the men that when they're in the fiercest part of the battle, you're to back off so Uriah is abandoned alone, and so that he's ensured he dies in battle." Right? So he writes this, seals it. "Uriah, yeah? I got a message for you. Here, give this to the general." Gives the death warrant to Uriah. No, it's sealed. He didn't open it. Can you give this to the general for me? Yeah. So Uriah brings it to the general. "Hey, King David sent a message." Opens it up and says, basically, "Make sure you get in a fierce battle, put Uriah up front, and then back off and let him." And he's looking. Okay, and that's what he did. They got in a battle, and they put Uriah's group foolishly into this part of a battle they should never be in because it's like a death wish. And Uriah, when it got really fierce, they backed off. Uriah got killed, but also a lot of other men got killed too. So the messenger comes back later to let David know what's going on. He said, "Oh, how's the war going?" "Oh, well, it's this and that, but you know, there was a battle and all these men died." "Oh, yeah, oh, no, by the way, Uriah the Hittite died." "Oh, that's too bad." He goes, "I want to let you know, King, too, like a lot of men died in that battle because you ordered them to go into this thing that it was kind of ill-advised, and like a lot of them died kind of when they didn't have to." And King David was real flippant about it. His response was, "Do not let this matter trouble you, for the sword devours one now and another one later. Now don't worry about it, you know." Now, the only thing he cared about was getting Uriah out of the way. So, you know, if it comes out that Bathsheba's pregnant, it'll look like maybe Uriah did and he died. But what he did now was after Uriah died, he took Bathsheba and he made her his wife. God was not happy about this in the least bit, you know. So God sends Prophet Nathan to go have a little talk to David one-on-one, is what he says. How are we in time? I don't have anybody know? I'm used to having a big clock behind me. What's that?
7:07.
Oh, we got hours. No, we don't. All right. The Lord sent the prophet Nathan to David, and when he came to him, the prophet said, "Hey, King David, tell me how you judge this case. In a certain town there were two men, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had flocks and herds in great numbers, but the poor man had nothing at all except one little baby lamb that he had bought. He nourished her, and she grew up with him and his children. Of what little he had she ate, from his own cup she drank, and in his bosom she slept, and she was like a daughter to this man. Now a visitor came to the rich man, but he spared his own flocks and herds to prepare a meal for the traveler who had come to him. Instead, he took the poor man's baby lamb and prepared it for the one who had come to him." King David grew very angry with that man and said to the prophet Nathan, "As the Lord lives, the man who does this deserves death. He shall make fourfold restitution for the lamb because he has done this thing and was unsparing." And Nathan said to David, "You're that man." And then he said, and this is what God has to say. This is the word of God. "Thus says the Lord God of Israel, I anointed you king over Israel. I delivered you from the hand of Saul. I gave you your Lord's house and your Lord's wives for your own. I gave you the house of Israel and Judah. And if this were not enough, I could count up more for you still. Why have you despised the Lord and done what is evil in his sight? You have cut down Uriah the Hittite with the sword, and his wife you took as your own, and him you killed with the sword of the Amorites. Now therefore the sword shall never depart from your house, because you have despised me, and you have taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife. Thus says the Lord, I will bring evil upon you out of your own house. I will take your wives before your very eyes and give them to your neighbor. He shall lie with your wives in broad daylight. You have acted in secret, but I will do this in the presence of all of Israel, in the presence of the sun itself." Then David said to Nathan, and he crumbled. He said, "I've sinned against the Lord," and he was like crying. And Nathan answered, "For this part your Lord has removed your sin." The Lord forgave him his sin. What exactly does that mean? He's not going to go to hell for this, okay? However, on earth, there's going to be great consequences for what he did. He said, "You shall not die, but since you have utterly spurned the Lord by this deed, the child born to you shall surely die." And then Nathan returned to his house. So what happened? The child that King David had with Bathsheba was born, but then it died as an infant. So that child died. Now, King David, God said you're going to have problems from your own house. You hear what happens. King David had another son named Amnon and a daughter named Tamar. They were children of King David, but had different mothers. David now had multiple wives. So he was the father of all these kids, but he had some kids from this wife and this wife and this wife. And so some kids were half kids and they were half brothers and sisters. And, you know, they had kids kind of all over the place. A lot of them were halves. So David had a son named Amnon, a daughter named Tamar. There were children David had different mothers. Amnon was strongly attracted to his half-sister Tamar. One day he sexually assaulted her. This made Tamar's full brother, Absalom, very angry. At one point, Absalom killed his half-brother Amnon for what he did to his full sister Tamar. This whole series of incidents made their father, King David, very sad. After Absalom killed his half-brother, he ran to another land and hid for 3 years. After 3 years, David allowed Absalom to come back, but he wouldn't talk to him. He just ignored him. He wouldn't speak to him at all. And Absalom started to get resentful because David wouldn't talk to him, his father, and then he started to hate David. And Absalom's hatred for his father David grew over time. He became power hungry and he wanted to get rid of his father David, King David, so he could become king. Absalom began to tell lies to the people, making himself look good, and his father King David looked bad. Many people believed these lies, and they began to follow Absalom as their leader instead of King David. At one point, King David and his friends had to flee their castle because they're afraid that Absalom would try to attack and try to kill the king. Sure enough, Absalom brought an army with him and invaded King David's castle in Jerusalem with the intent to kill him, to replace him as king. But David heard about this and he ran away before this happened. Now at one point, they went to battle with each other. King David gathered his army, and his son Absalom gathered his army, and they went into battle. During the battle, Absalom was killed. Now, even though Absalom was trying to kill his father, King David was extremely heartbroken. He was crushed that his son died because he loved him, and he didn't want any of this stuff to happen. He didn't want his son to turn on him. And as God foretold, David had serious consequences in his life due to a series of sins of killing Uriah and stealing his wife Bathsheba. And there, his first son, Bathsheba, died at birth, or shortly after birth. His son Amnon hurt his daughter Tamar. Another son, Absalom, then killed Amnon, his own brother, because of this. Absalom tried to kill King David, and Absalom himself was killed. So after this, David lost peace, and in the rest of his life, for a lot of it, for purposely engaging in this series of just very horrible sins. God forgave him eternally, but it doesn't mean there's still no consequences. I can murder somebody, and God will forgive me if I turn to him, and I might not go to hell for it, but I still got to go to jail for it. There's still consequences on earth for things, even though you may be forgiven eternally. Okay, so we finished the books of Samuel. We're going to hop in the books of Kings really quickly, and we'll wrap it up because of course will come and throw us out. We're in books 1 and 2 of Kings. We're going to hear the next couple of kings, King David's son Solomon. Anybody hear of Solomon? Yeah? Okay. When King David was very old, he anointed one of his sons to be the next king of Israel after him, and his name was Solomon. Solomon was another son that King David had with Bathsheba. So the first child died, but he had other children with Bathsheba. And one of them was this boy, and his name was Solomon, and he became eventually king. Now King David gave Solomon instructions to always follow the ways, laws, and rules and testimonies of God. And again, conditional. David told Solomon if he did follow God, King David assured Solomon that he would prosper in whatever he does, and he will always have a descendant on the throne. Again, conditional. And then eventually King David died, and Solomon took his place. Now one night, God appeared to King Solomon in a dream. And he told King Solomon, ask me for whatever you want, and I will grant it. And King Solomon said that because God made him king, he asked God to give him wisdom to be a good king for the Israelites, so that he would make good decisions as their king. And this really pleased God. God said to Solomon, because you have asked for this, and have not asked for yourself long life or riches, or the life of your enemies, but you have asked for yourself understanding to discern what is right, behold, I now do according to your word. I will give you a wise and discerning mind, so that none like you has been before you, and none like you shall rise after you. I will give you also what you have not asked for, both riches and honor, so that no other king shall compare to you in all your days. Conditional. And if you walk in my ways, keeping my statutes and commandments, as your father David walked, then I will lengthen your days. One thing you notice in the Bible, although David committed that horrible series of sins, God continually uses him an example of, if you act like your father David, who was a man after my own heart, if you be like David. So it seems like David was great before the episode of Bathsheba. He was great after. That 1 year period where he went crazy and grabbed Bathsheba and killed Uriah was like a bad thing, but he was good before and he repented, and he was good after. And God used it. It's almost like God almost forgot that, like he forgave it. And he uses him as an example of, this is a guy after my own heart, even though he did that treacherous thing. Now, God greatly blessed King Solomon. God made him the wisest man in the world at the time, gave him great riches. People from different nations came to Israel to hear King Solomon speak because of his wisdom. God instructed King Solomon to build him a temple. Remember, David wanted this important. David wanted to build him a temple because he felt bad. He said, listen, God, I'm in this nice cedar house or palace, and you got your ark in this tent. Can I build you a great place? And God said, thanks, but no, your son will. So David felt bad that where he lived was better than where the ark was. You're going to see the contrast with Solomon. This is another reason why maybe God said David was a man after my own heart. Solomon gathered, now God said, listen, Solomon, I want you to build the temple for me, and I'm going to give you all the supplies you need. I'll make sure you get it. And, like, he changed the king's hearts of other countries. They were just bringing Solomon stuff, giving him gifts and everything he uses to build the temple. Solomon gathered almost 200,000 men to work to help build the temple for God in Israel. Now listen to this. It took Solomon 7 years to build a temple, and it was very fancy and beautiful. But then he took 13 years to build his own palace for himself, and it was about 4 times the size. See the difference between him and David? Now, the Bible didn't say it was a sin or anything bad, but it caught my attention. David was really concerned. Hey, God, I really, my place is better than yours. That's not right. Solomon made sure his place is better than God's, So we start to see possibly some cracks in the character of Solomon. As soon as King Solomon finished building a temple for God, God appeared to Solomon. He told King Solomon that if he was a man who followed God with integrity of heart and uprightness, doing whatever God commanded him to, and keeping God's laws and rules, then God will establish King Solomon's royal throne forever over Israel, as he promised Solomon's father, King David. However, this is from God. Very specific. All right? It's not like, Solomon, you didn't know better. God warned King Solomon that if he or his children turned away from following God and did not keep his commandments and the laws he set before King Solomon, but go and serve other gods to worship them, then God will cut off Israel from the land that he has given them, and he will cast the temple out of his sight, and Israel will be cursed by all peoples. Solomon's palace will become a heap of ruins. And when people ask why God did this to Israel in King Solomon's house, they will say, because they abandoned their Lord, their God, who brought their fathers out of the land of Egypt, and laid hold of other gods, and worshipped them and served them. Therefore, the Lord has brought disaster on them. So he was warned. And it's not like he's dumb and didn't understand. God made him the wisest guy on earth. It wasn't, I don't know what you meant. He clearly warned him, and he gave him the mind to understand what he's saying. Little side note, which is kind of neat. God made Solomon so wise, but also gave him such riches that kings and queens from other countries would just come to talk to him and see him. It was like going to see the wise man. And there's one story of the queen of a country called Sheba, the Queen of Sheba. She heard of the great riches and blessings that God had given King Solomon. So she took a journey to visit King Solomon to see if the reports are true. She asked King Solomon very difficult questions, and he's able to answer every one beyond all of her expectations. The wisdom, the wealth, and the blessings that God had given King Solomon took the Queen of Sheba's breath away. King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba exchanged exceedingly valuable gifts, treasures, and riches with each other. And then the Queen of Sheba went home to her own land. So it's kind of just an example of how Solomon was thought of by the other royalty of other countries. I mean, this is the guy. He's just wisdom is beyond whatever. But as you'll see, just because God gives you a talent or a skill doesn't mean you're going to use it right, even wisdom. Despite King Solomon being the wisest man in the world, as he got older, he began to go against what God told him to do. God told Solomon not to marry any women who worshipped other gods because they would pull Solomon away from God to worship their gods. Also, a man's supposed to only have one wife. Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Just think about that. 700.
He defeated Islam.
Huh?
He defeated the law of Islam.
700 wives and 300 concubines. What kind of wisdom is that? He was perverted by lust like so many other guys in the Bible. Or, so many kings, so many people in the Bible were okay until they rose up to this exceeding level of wealth, power, where everything, and you see it all the time with movie stars and stuff now. David was fine until he became king, and then he saw Bathsheba. Saul was okay until he became king. Solomon, God gave this guy everything, and he became king. And I'll get 700 wives and 300 concubines. That's a good idea. Okay. Well. Now, here's the problem with that. Well, that's a problem by itself. I don't think you need anything else. But here's the additional problem. I got one wife, and sometimes I'm oh God, that's not a tape. I have to have my son edit that. Many of these 700 wives and 300 concubines followed other gods, and they pulled King Solomon away from following God to follow their gods. Some of these gods involved demon worship, which included extremely evil things such as human sacrifice. What King Solomon did greatly angered God. God said that because Solomon disobeyed him and was worshiping false gods and demons, God will take 11 out of the 12 kingdoms that King Solomon now ruled. Remember 12 tribes of Israel? He's king over all of them. He's going to take 11 away. And out of the hands of his son. So he said, listen, you're going to have a son who's going to be king. He's going to lose 11 out of 12 tribes. I'm just going to leave one with you. And that's for the sake of David. It was up to me, I'd take everything. But I promised David and I promised Abraham that will make you the great nation, so I'll leave you a remnant, but you're going to lose everything else, and your son's going to lose it. Up to this point, King Solomon had total peace in his kingdom. Because of King Solomon's rebellion against God's direct instructions to him, God took his protection of King Solomon away. This allowed numerous enemies of King Solomon to rise up and give him trouble. King Solomon ruled Israel for 40 years. He started out following God and all went well, exceptionally well. But he turned away from following God and then he had major problems. Now King Solomon died and then his son Rehoboam took over as king. We'll cover him. It's real short and then we're done for tonight. Now his son Rehoboam was anointed king of Israel. And at the moment, the family, Solomon and his son, still have the 12 tribes. God said, I'll pull it out of your son's hand. He didn't do it to Solomon. So he's still king over all the tribes of Israel. And you're going to see what happens. When Rehoboam was anointed king of Israel, the people came to him and said, hey, new king, King Rehoboam, your father, King Solomon, put a heavy yoke on us. He's really hard on us. Now listen, if you lighten your harsh service and the heavy yoke your father imposed on us, we'll follow you. So he said, listen, let me think about it for 3 days, and I'll get back to you people. So he went to the elders. These were elders that worked for King Solomon. These were older guys. He gave them advice. And he said, hey, this is what the people said. They came to me and said, your father was real strict and harsh on us. Can you lighten the burden on us? If you do, we'll follow you. And the elders said, you should. You should. We'll lighten up the burden, and these people will follow you forever. I don't know. He went to his knucklehead buddies. He's a young guy. So he went to guys like his age, young guys. Hey guys, what should I do about this? The people came to me and said, hey, your father is real tough on us as king. If you lighten up the burden, we'll follow you. This is what you tell him. Tell him you think your dad was tough. You're going to be 10 times as tough. You tell them you think your dad was hard. You don't know what hard was. Yeah, that's a good idea. So he goes to the people after 3 days and he says to the people, this is the answer to your request to lighten up the yoke. My father put on you a heavy yoke. I'm going to make it heavier. And I don't have it here. It's something like he said, the weight of my finger on you is going to be heavier than like all of my father's body or something. He said, my father whipped you with whips. I'm going to whip you with scorpions. Would you want to follow a guy like that? No. So they all said, every man to his tent. I guess it's a saying that means, I don't know what, but they say it all the time. They go to their tent. And 11 out of the 12, 10 out of the 12 tribes broke away and said, we're not following it. All right? 2 of them combined. Benjamin and Judah combined to be, it's called the southern kingdom, called the kingdom of Judah. So it's actually just one kingdom now. They combined. The other 10 said, the heck with you. And they broke away. And they became the northern kingdom of Israel. Now Israel's now split. Now it's 2 kingdoms. Northern kingdom of the 10 and the southern kingdom that King Rehoboam ruled now, which is just one kingdom. It's called the kingdom of Judah. Throughout the years, the kingdom of Judah and Israel had many kings. Some were good, some were bad. And that's where we'll stop today. When we meet next time, we're going to meet back at the, what it's called, Paris Center for next week. It's back to our regular home. I kind of like this. I don't know. Is this okay? Yeah. I mean, it's better in a church to learn the Bible, So we'll be back at the Paris Center next week. And I think 2 weeks from now, we'll be back here. But we have this place. Before, we had to cancel. Now we can do this here. So next week, regular time, we'll be back at the Paris Center. We're going to cover the prophets of Elijah and Elisha. They did all kinds of crazy miracles, which is really neat. They fought against the prophets of Baal. They did some kind of cool stuff and put them in their place. We're going to hear about the fall of Israel and Judah. They kept rebelling against God. Remember, there are 2 kingdoms now. Kept rebelling and following other gods, rebelling and following other gods. Finally, God said, I had enough. And he put the hammer down. So we're going to hear what happened. Okay? Thank you, everybody. Good seeing all of you. All right. Have a good night, and we'll see you, I guess, next week. Thanks for coming out. I'm always afraid nobody's going to show. Every week I'm thinking it's going to be me and a janitor. And the janitor says to me, I'm only here because I have to be. You know? But luckily y'all came, so it's good. Okay. Oh yeah, and hey, if you miss it, it's on YouTube. Remember, I tape this every week. This will be up over the weekend. So if you ever miss it, or if there's people that you think, yeah, they would like to see us, but they just can't make it, or they live out of town or out of state, tell them about this. I'm going to see it up on YouTube. There is, and I don't know what it is, but there's certain numbers that God uses repeatedly. 47, 3. But yeah, 40 is a lot. They use 40 quite a bit. And I don't know exactly what significance is, but I see it over and over and over.
Was Solomon the king where the two women brought the baby?
Yes.
Solomon.
And the one, they both had babies, and one died at night, and the one stole the other one, so now it's mine, and so they said, hey, you know, what are we doing? He said, well, chop her in half. And the real mother said, just give it to her, I can't do that. And the other was like, yeah, chop her in half, so, yeah. Now, what's interesting is, I read that, I thought, that's really wise. When you get to the New Testament, and you read the stuff Jesus said, I remember the first time I read it, I said, oh my God, like, it just blows, like, there's nothing that compares to it. Everything that was said before in the Old Testament when Jesus started speaking, like it's just Solomon, like that then over and over. It's like, oh my God, like you must be a son of God because the stuff's coming out of your mouth is just mind blowing. You know, I can't wait till we get a New Testament. I wish we could do it now, but we got to cover everything.
Are we getting the pictures next week? You promised.
I don't know. Yeah, I got to see. I didn't announce it. Probably not next week. Soon.
Okay.
Yeah. I got to announce it.
He's asking about how did you see the Lord, the Father, God the Father. It says, initially said you were sleeping, the angel came and woke you up.
No, different. It's a whole story. I'm going to tell the whole group.
Okay.
It takes about 20 minutes.
Okay.
So I'm going to announce it. I forgot this week, but I'm going to give at least 2 weeks announcements so everybody could hear, because I'm going to be like, don't miss it.
Yeah.
Make sure you're here.
Yeah.
You know, I may do it right after New Year's, just because once you get into Thanksgiving and Christmas, you know, December, people miss because they got to go shopping.
Yeah.
I got to, you know. So I'm thinking like in January, like the second or third one, I'm going to announce it like as soon as I get back and say, make sure you show up in 2 weeks, but I'll announce it. It was mind blowing. Yeah.
How about, you talked about the giants.
Nephilim?
Yeah, where did they come from?
Okay, let me turn this off.